I'm Deirdre Dixon Gilbert, your host of Malpractice Diaries, MD. We tell the secrets they keep. Woody had just started his new dream job, 2 months prior to having trouble sleeping. He went to his family physician and was given an antidepressant called Zoloft, an off-label drug for insomnia. 5 weeks later, Woody took his life. Why? The Tim Witczak Story.
The real story of psychiatric abuse can best be told by those who have borne the brunt of this assault. In tonight's case, the wife and brother-in-law of 37-year-old Minnesota man Tim Witczak, known to those who loved him as Woody. These Human Rights Awards recipients not only challenged the lethal effects of psychiatry's drugs, but also the incestuous relationship between the pharmaceutical industry and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Here's a brief video of their work.
From its outset, the history of antidepressants is one of claim after claim by psychiatrists of miraculous new discoveries, all inevitably discarded because of tragic and often lethal side effects. After years of public pressure, in 2004, the Food and Drug Administration finally shattered psychiatry's hype when it ordered its strongest warning, a black box, added to antidepressant packaging, warning parents that the drugs could cause their children to commit suicide. But that was only half the story.
First fish of the Yukon.
Woody Witczak had a life to be envied.
He's not giving up easy.
A life of adventure, a loving wife, a job as vice president of sales.
To me, there's nothing sadder to imagine that Woody, this guy who loved life, took his own life.
Kim Witczak hates the fact her husband's dead. She hates even more the way he died. On August 6th, he was found hanging from the rafters of his garage, dead at 37.
Woody he's a statistic.
His wife blames these. Woody's doctor gave him Zoloft to help ease stress and sleeplessness. 5 weeks after Woody started Zoloft, Kim got a phone call.
They're like, Woody's dead. I'm like, and I start screaming. I'm like, what do you mean Woody's dead?
This doesn't make any sense.
Kim and her brother-in-law Eric spend days researching the possible link between antidepressants and suicide. Kim says the pill took her husband away. She desperately wishes they had questioned the drug instead of Woody's mind.
Turning their grief into a crusade, Kim Witczak and Eric Swan began a relentless campaign to publicly warn adults that, like children taking antidepressants, they too were at risk. In 2004, they established a website, Woody Matters. Within a year, it had reached 250,000 people.
You eased the mind of a dear friend of mine who thought he was crazy.
Your site is helping others. It is a powerful response to Woody's loss.
Thank you for your site. It convinced me to think 3 times before pursuing this match.
Thank you for creating this website. It's helped me understand what happened and that our family is not alone.
But to Kim, warning the public wasn't enough. In May 2004, she took on Zoloft's manufacturer, pharmaceutical giant Pfizer.
It's all about the bottom line.
Karen Barth Menzies is Kim Witczak's attorney. Today she filed a lawsuit against Pfizer. It claims Pfizer knew Zoloft was unsafe and claims the company had not told Woody's doctor, or any doctor, about the possibility of suicide.
Kim also attacked Pfizer's aggressive marketing practices, charging them with gross negligence and fraud. Pfizer demanded the suit be dismissed, claiming they were not liable for their failure to warn about dangerous side effects because Zoloft was protected by the approval of the FDA. Kim and Eric obtained the support of Minnesota Attorney General Mike Hatch, who filed a legal brief in support of the suit and to protect the state's right to sue drug companies that have lied about the drug's efficacy and side effects. On July 20th, 2005, United States Chief District Court Judge James M. Rosenbaum agreed. and ruled against Pfizer. The judge slammed pharmaceuticals' mass-market print and television advertisements, specifically advertising Zoloft by personifying it as a happy, bouncing oval cartoon character. But that was not all. Kim also secured the right to take confidential internal drug company documents obtained through the lawsuit and make them public. Documents in hand, Kim and Eric met with U.S. congressmen and senators, presenting them with the damning evidence and urging them to take action. The secret drug company records were also shown to officials at the FDA. Not only were the papers totally unknown to them, but one even implicated an FDA employee there at the meeting.
Tomorrow, the FDA will hold hearings regarding a possible link between antidepressants and suicide.
Tomorrow's hearings will focus mainly on whether teenage patients on antidepressants are at greater risk for suicide. But Kim Witczak wants people to know it's not just teens at risk.
Through the combined efforts of Kim, Eric, and the many others who believe that Woody matters, on June 30th, 2005, the FDA issued a public health advisory warning that antidepressants, including Zoloft, can drive not just children, but also adults to suicide. Today, through personal appearances, the internet, and broadcast media, Kim and Eric continue their mission to expose the dangers of psychiatric drugs, because across our great country, there are millions more just like Woody, and all of them matter too.
Let's welcome Kim Witczak, his wife.
Hi, Deirdre. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks.
Great, great. I'm so glad that you decided to come on to the show today. And we wanted to give you this opportunity to talk to us about Tim, Woody, as they say they call him, and some of the questions that I think that our audience would like to know about, off-label drugs, what happened, and what you are doing as an advocate for those that have been harmed by labeling issues or suicide and those things that has happened to your husband and to others in the past. Let's go to our first question. The FDA approves all prescription drugs sold in the United States. And one of the things that I was a little confused of is that they said that the agency cannot limit how doctors prescribe these drugs after they are on the market. Can you sort of explain to me how the FDA approves drugs but can't limit them?
Sure. Well, first of all, the FDA, as you know, there's an approval process, and the drugs that they approved are for a specific indication. Mm-hmm. However, by law, once the drug has been approved for that specific indication, it can be used in any way that a doctor so wants to use it. So the FDA always says we do not license, or they don't control what doctors do. So once the drug is on the market, it is they're able to use it how they see fit. And that is called off-label. And off-label is, there are certain drugs that get used that they might have been seen in an off-label setting, meaning it was never approved, but then eventually the drug company will go and get an indication for it, an FDA-approved indication. With off-label, technically a drug company cannot market to the doctors that it is that they can use that drug. However, there are many ways that it gets put into the system, and I call it, whether it's considered standard of care. So some doctors will tell you, oh, well, that's standard of care. And so those are things that I always say that somebody should ask the question when they go to their doctor. Is this drug FDA approved for this indication? I think that right there starts a conversation. And if a doctor says to you, oh, well, it's standard of care or standard of practice, I would keep furthering the pressure to get an answer out of them, because I want to know, and I think people should know. Woody didn't know that it was that it wasn't approved. He did what most people do, which is they go in, you are given a drug from your doctor, you assume that the doctor's giving you a drug that has been approved for that condition. And when you come back and you find out after the fact, as we did with Woody, like this drug, Zoloft, which is an antidepressant, was never approved for insomnia. But, they use it for all kinds of conditions. They give it for, I've heard things, people getting it for PMD, pre-dysphonic disorder. So like PMS, people going into postpartum depression. It's given for anxiety, sadness, depression, and, it's being used all over. So like in Woody's case, it was an unapproved indication, and he had no idea.
Wow. So the doctor, per se, gets these drugs from who?
Well, doctors, I think they've done a better job, because there's all kinds of, in terms of not allowing samples and stuff. But when Woody got the drug, he was actually given samples, and those were samples supplied by the drug companies, right? Okay. So those were samples in the closet. Woody went home with a 3-week sample pack of Zoloft. And, most of the education that doctors get, is from drug reps. And even there is an opportunity for drug companies to promote off-label, although drug companies have paid major fines over the years for marketing to doctors off-label. And I think they've, $20 billion or some crazy amount of monies that have been paid for fines that have been paid by the industry.
So you sued the maker of Zoloft. Why did you do that? And what is it that they did not do that caused you to do that?
Well, from the very beginning, when all of a sudden my husband, who loved life, who didn't suffer from depression, didn't have any other mental health conditions, when all of a sudden 5 weeks later, the only new thing in his life was Zoloft, and he hung himself, something didn't intuitively make sense. And literally the night Woody was found, we started Googling, and we found that the FDA had been looking at the antidepressants and linked to suicide since the 90s. And so when you start putting all of that together, we're like, wait, we had no information. Woody was not warned. So we did file, we talked to lawyers, and there was something that Woody happened, like it was within weeks after Woody got put on the drug, and I will never forget. He came home and told me his head, he was on the floor with his head, hands around his head like a vice, kept going, Kim, you got to help me. I don't know what's happening. My head's outside my body looking in. So that I will never forget that. And so when we were talking to one of the lawyers about Woody's case, like, because this guy didn't have depression, I mean, he went from not sleeping and then this thing head outside the body, and 5 weeks later from the time he started, he's hanging. And that, what I just described to you, the head outside the body, the lawyer, my law firm that eventually became my law firm out of California, had internal company documents talking about the head outside the body, where they were writing to the company, the kind of the FDA equivalent from South Africa, saying that they had patients on the same milligrams that Woody was on outside their bodies looking in. And they're like, oh, it happens on all SSRIs, which is the class of antidepressants.
Explain to us, what is black box suicide warning? What did you have to do with that? And what exactly does that mean to the audience when you say that?
Well, at the time, there were no warnings, and black box warnings is the most serious of warnings that gets put on a drug. And it takes a lot of, you don't just, the FDA takes those warnings very serious. And so if a drug gets a black box warning, that means that there have been deaths associated with it and some serious, serious harms. And it also requires that if a person was to get their and look at the paperwork that comes with the drugs, it should be literally in a black box, with the around the warning itself, and it's at the top of the paperwork. And there are also some things that a warning means that any of your advertising that you see on TV must include any of the warnings from the black box on TV. And so at the time when Woody was around, there were no warnings. And so none of the commercials, none of the paperwork had anything to do with the suicide link. And why we took this on with the link to suicide is, as I was mentioning, in 1991, the FDA held hearings that were almost identical to what I did in 2004. But in 91, when it was just Prozac on the market, and all these people were coming forward, people from the public that were talking about their loved one's suicide or harm to themselves. And at that time, FDA told Eli Lilly, the maker of Prozac, to go back and look at and study suicidality. The company never did. The FDA never followed up. And meanwhile, you've now got Pfizer that comes out with Zoloft, and you have GlaxoSmithKline that comes out with Paxil at the same time. And it wasn't until 2004, a year after Woody died, that warnings got put on there for kids up to 18. And eventually we kept pushing for it, and the black box warnings got put on to age 24. But they still, to this day, are not on the for anybody over 24. And so it's one of the things that we're constantly battling is this idea of all ages are at risk when first going on antidepressants, when the dosages change, or trying to get off of them.
And it seems that they're very dangerous, because I know that Christophe St. John, that was on the Young and the Restless, actually, same thing happened to him. His son, nobody's warning anybody about any of these things. And it's a strange thing, because I know before the warnings, as you would say, there was nothing. And now you see this stuff all on the TV constantly, even saying death. And I mean, who would want to take, medications actually? And I wouldn't, the more I start reading these, the side effects of these things, I'm like you, Kim, I will not touch it. I don't want it, because they're dangerous. And like you said, some of the things that you're saying, I don't think that Woody would want to take it either, had he, or you all knew what the side effects were.
100%, because I know who Woody was. If they even had told him that there was a link to suicide, he'd be like, he wouldn't even think about taking that drug, because all he wanted to do was have something help him sleep. And he trusted his doctor, who said, this will help you take the edge off and help you sleep. You see, probably now you can't even watch a nightly news or anything during the day. They're very specially target marketed to an audience, right? But suicide is, they just ramble off all the side effects, including death by suicide. But I think people have become so numb to hearing those warnings that they think, and even if you go to your doctor and you ask, like, well, are you sure there's, I've heard about the suicide, they totally discredit you, and they think you're the crazy one for even asking them. Oh, that only happens, they have to do it because their lawyers or something told them. And doctors to this day don't even believe it. So, one of the things that we were able to do from got out of the lawsuit is we got reams of documents that were they weren't necessarily discovered in my case, but they were discovered in prior cases. And we got them, the judge in my case looked at them for years. Pfizer had argued that they were trade secrets. And the only trade secret is that they were keeping a secret from us, the public, you know?
Right.
So we got those out and we literally marched those to the FDA. We marched them to members of Congress because they were looking at the link between the companies and you know, who's conducting the clinical trials at these universities. You know, they're looking at all the money flows that, you know, is flowing through. And we delivered to the media. I mean, trust me, I still have those binders. And because when you see the company and FDA's response on black and white letterhead, and you've had the experience, I'm like, no, this is a shame. Like, this should not be happening. People need to know. And I think that's the importance of the role of lawsuits is these documents, because that's the only way we can get into a company to see really what's happening behind closed doors. I had no idea that the FDA has no legal authority to go into a company's files, only through a lawsuit, which means by the time you get to a lawsuit, that means something has had to have happened to people.
And this sounds so familiar. You know, when we think about the Erin Brockovich story, I think it was another movie called Dark Waters that just came out. You know, you think about how they are hiding all of this evidence in their legal paperwork, and they're not showing anybody any of this stuff. What's real shocking to me is, I believe when we spoke earlier on, when we first met years ago, you talked about the FDA approval process. And that was shocking to me, how fast you can fast track these things, or how many people it takes. Can you explain that to the audience so that, you know, we can be informed citizens of exactly what an FDA approved process looks like?
Sure. Well, first of all, I always say FDA approval does not guarantee safety, right? And so I think that a lot of people just think that that means, oh, it's safe and effective. It doesn't guarantee that. And especially nowadays, you know, right now there's basically there's different phases of, you know, getting a drug approved, starting with the very initial where they tested against animals to see for toxicity, to see if there are any harms, you know, just some general information about the compounds. Then they go in and they start applying to get the drug approved by the FDA. And there's phase 1, which is where they start testing on people, and a small number of people, just safety, like, are there any, you know, like real serious harms? Then it goes to, you know, phase 2 and phase 3. However, so that's like the typical process. But what has happened, where a lot of people don't understand, is something that Congress has helped grant. Because, you know, there's been a lot of pressure, and, you know, the narrative out there is it takes too long for the FDA to approve these life-saving drugs, right?
Right.
And so you hear, so there's new pathways that the Congress has allowed that the FDA, that drug companies can now use for drugs that there are no drugs for a condition, right? So they maybe in the past have used drugs off label, because then they can use something called breakthrough therapy designation or fast tracking, which basically allows them to fast track it with, you know, right now the clinical, it's gold standard is 2 clinical trials that placebo controlled, that they can basically replicate the results, right? That they present to the FDA. Well, with fast tracking, you might only be able to do, you only need maybe 1 clinical trial, and it's done on a small number of people. So they can use it, and there's an advantage of that, right? So a lot, you know, today I sit on the FDA advisory committee, and a lot of the drugs that we're approving are coming to market before the FDA using this fast tracking mechanism. And it's a business decision too, right? And what people don't realize is it might have only had, like in this case of, it was a Parkinson's psychosis drug, Nuplazid, and it only had like 180 people in the full clinical trial, and, you know, I think 13, 14 people dropped out. So it's really a small number of people. And eventually I was one of two people that voted no for it because it had harms in there. And eventually I said, this, mark my words, this will come down and it'll in the hands, there'll be people who die. And sure enough, the media, CNN started looking at it, and there were over 700 deaths associated with this drug. And what people don't realize is, and then of course the media always tells it like it's breakthrough therapy. So that means like, oh my God, there's a new drug that my family, we can use because my father, my husband suffer from Parkinson's. So then it creates this false hope. And so it gets used in marketing terms, but that's not really what it is. It's a mechanism to get things through the FDA approval fast. And I always say it's really about once it's on the market, you and I, the everyday person, we're the real clinical trial.
Wow. So it's basically a few people that they're testing this on. It's not really based on safety, but basically fast tracking and putting it out to market. And I think about every time when they said, 1 out of 10 people love Colgate toothpaste.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so did they just do 10 people? Right. And it's like, okay, so now we got an approved toothpaste, Colgate, on the market and only 10 people. And I remember some time ago, and I'm not sure if this is still the case, where it only usually takes 2 people to put something on the market, 2 people to vote. Is that a true case? It's, sort of.
Well, I think, that's probably a nice little, it's a nice little thing, but that's not really what it is. But ultimately, I think, we don't know what we don't know. At the end of the day, you and I keep saying all the time, it's probably why it's my passion to talk about this, because you and I, when we go to take the drugs or our family takes the drugs, we're the real clinical trial. And so this is where if a harm didn't really show up, the safety piece of it didn't really show up in this small trial, and also remember a condensed, shortened trial, because there's good reason why you want to have something short, because if it doesn't happen here, then it didn't happen in the drug trial, right? And so if it happened on the outside, well, that's not really part of the trial design. So there's intentional the way drug trials get designed.
Okay. All right. So let's debunk the fake news. I know that you talk about that all the time, debunking the fake news. Exactly what do you mean by that as it relates to this? Because I know we talk about medical malpractice, and a lot of people don't really understand how this connects to medical malpractice. What does, taking the wrong medication have to do with it? What is fake news? Because we know, even during this time of COVID, the fake news and those conspiracy theorist people, explain to us, what did you mean when you were talking about let's debunk the fake news?
Well, I mean, I was kind of taking it because, you always hear Trump in the beginning say, look, it's all fake news and debunking it. But really what I wanted to do is, I think pharmaceutical marketing and all of that, and all of the people and the follow the money that are part of the system that have been creating some of the fake news, right? Oh, this drug is safe. So there's things like following all the commercial interests. I always say garbage in, garbage out. Who owns, like, transparency, like conflicts of interest. These are all things about debunking the medical the drugs that we take, like getting really behind who's behind it, what are the conflicts of interest that exist, what about like you hear at FDA approvals, you have, or at the FDA advisory committees, you have all these patient groups that come in, but they're actually not real patients like you and me that have been harmed, that are grassroots. There are actually patients that have been brought in by the drug company that, of course, or those that, you know, say they want more drugs. So it's about digging deeper to understand when you hear a drug's great and it's been approved, like, what does that mean? What are all of the things behind a drug approval that are beyond just the FDA, right? It's the ghostwriting that I had mentioned, who are actually companies that actually write the articles, but they find doctors to put their names on it, and then it gets put into these journals that doctors read. So it looks like it was written by doctors, but it was actually written by the company. Now that's frightening.
It is frightening.
Yeah, it's called ghostwriting. And
just like if you were doing a book, like a regular book. So they use this in pharmaceutical.
Yes, I was shocked. One of the documents that we had gotten out from SEAL, it was the plan for Pfizer and Zoloft social anxiety. And they already had the publication plan and all of like when it was going to run, what the title is. And there were a couple open spaces that said Dr. TBD. So they still needed to find the doctor to be determined who was, but they already knew when the journal article was going to run, but they had to put the author name on it.
And this is not illegal.
No, well, it should be. Like, I'm shocked that none of this is, if our doctors don't know about it, they're not learning about it in med school, how are we going to know, you know? So that's what I talk about. I talk about, I call them astroturf patient groups, right? So that are basically mouthpieces. I talk about who's controlling the narrative about the drugs, you know, looking at the PR machine behind these pharmaceutical companies and the marketing. My entire career I've spent is in advertising and marketing. So I kind of understand our business. And I also know how we can use the power of advertising and the message and the media and those simple things that I was saying to you about breakthrough therapy designation, which is a fast tracking. But if you write it into your press release, when it goes to the media, they'll say, "Oh, we have a new breakthrough drug."
That's not what that means. It's not a breakthrough drug. It's just a fast track drug, right? Something that's being fast tracked through the system. That's so that they can get it through for whatever reason, you know, whether it's monetarily. Usually we know that that's usually what it is because it's a lot of money involved. I do know that I heard, especially during this time too, that pharmaceutical companies actually go into hospitals and they sort of, what do you call it, ghost them, I guess you can say, or they walk behind them all day long and they're actually watching doctors you know, to see whether or not they're giving them the drugs that they've supplied, you know, for patients.
Right, during COVID?
Right, during COVID, like during the time in the nursing homes that they were actually allowed to go into nursing homes, even into the hospital systems, and they were tracking the doctors that they were supposedly had given the scholarship money to. They call it a scholarship.
Oh, right.
And it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they have like a quota. And they are, you know, they walk behind them. They're watching them all day. And they're trying to make sure that, you know, we gave you this money. You're going to give this particular drug. And again, you got patients who are not allowed to, you know, don't know what you're giving them. And I'm sure that there's no label, you know what I'm saying? Nobody's actually telling them that there could be some harm to this.
No.
These are the kinds of things that I'm hoping and praying that you know, would fight for as one of your objectives, your goals, with fighting against that, because I think that's terrible that they are allowed to do that. Matter of fact, I didn't even know. One of the attorneys with the organization was talking about how this is happening right now during this time. So what are your last thoughts? What do you want to tell the audience here? Leave the audience with something. Give us what you want to leave us with.
Well, first of all, I don't just assume that the drug that you're being given is safe and effective. I mean, is safe, right? Just because it's FDA approved, it's given to your doctor. I would absolutely research, ask questions. And I know, I think that's the thing that I wish we would have done, is we would have asked questions.
And that's a sad thing to say, Kim, because in an emergency situation such as yours or anybody else's, when we go to the doctor, we've always trusted, right? I'm guilty. We all guilty of that. Is that we never ask questions. Whatever the doctor said was it. But what we're trying to tell now, especially for this show, we're wanting to tell the secrets that they keep, because we want to be able to help those before this actually happens. And so we want to thank you so much, Kim, for coming by.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Giving us your expertise, and look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks for tuning in to Malpractice Diaries, MD. We tell the stories they keep. Please make sure that you tune in next week, same time, same station, same Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we look forward to seeing you next week. See you soon.